to create community currency, so we don't have to rely on external banks to support our movement. We have to do our own community farming, so that way we can have our own food. We have to get carpenters that know how to build and make houses and things of that nature. We have to have our manufacturing programs. So revolution is when we can patronize one another for all these resources, and we don't have to rely upon the oppressor, because once we get to that element, then we know the revolution has begun.
Indeed. So just tacking it back, probably I should have asked you a question first. What would, or of course the name of this document is Revolution or Exodus. What, in your opinion, is your choosing and why?
Well, my choosing is a dichotomy of either or. So if you are going to do a revolution, you have to have a game plan. If you're going to do an exodus, you have to have a game plan. We should never confine our people to one option, because the moment that you have one thing going on and nothing here, nothing there, nothing here, you're done. Once they cut the head off here, these are the options. If you are doing both, it's going to be here. Now we have a cell here. We have a cell here that we can communicate with, and that they can also continue on the revolution, so that way they can rise up the minds of the Africans in the diaspora, so they can take the blueprint model that we installed here that's working and bring it overseas. But it can only work through solidarity. So solidarity cannot work just locally. It has to be international.
Indeed. And so, being that our people are very, we have a very childish and romanticized view of revolution, can you realistically paint a picture of what real revolution starts like? And I kind of want you to, elaborate on the internal revolution, the revolution of self, the mental and spiritual revolution that is a prerequisite to a physical revolution. I don't want to go too far with the question. Can you just answer that?
Yeah, so the question you're saying is that sometimes we have the wrong presuppositions or preconceived notions when identify what revolution is. The root word is revolve. What is changing? What is cycling? There's one thing that I've learned as a kid. We've all watched that movie, The Lion King, right? They had something called what? The circle of life. The circle of life was based on precepts and principles, and how do we keep everything homeostatic? Homeostasis is maintaining internal stability, so that way externally it can be reflected. So in self, if we are catering too much to our lower emotions or to our flesh, it's going to be very difficult for us to have a righteous revolution. Number two, we have to be able to expunge any of the idea or mindset of the system and those who are oppressing us. Because if we still have that in ourselves, then once the revolution begins, we're also going to be reflecting the oppressor. We have to do so righteously. So inside, you have to find some kind of cultural paradigm that can resolve the lower self and keep it at bay and focus more on the higher self. In our conscious community, we have several factions that actually address these things with various principles. And whether you deal with Kemetic science, whether you deal with the Moorish science, whether you deal with the Hebrew Israelite paradigm, in each one of these things, there are three main principles that are custom and that are common between all three. The first thing is identity. Who are you? We need to first identify who we are and how we are different and distinct from that which is oppressing us. The second thing is the oppressor. What is the oppressive system that is keeping us in the condition that we're in that's unfavorable to our survival? And the third thing is, what is the solution? So before we can externally create revolution, what's the circle of life that's going on internally? What character building techniques are you applying to self that is changing your character between today and tomorrow? Any kind of abstract thought that you have in your mind, let's say love is one of them. How is that being exemplified in your love each and every day? Love is a selfless act, not a selfish act. So if our objective every day when seeing our brothers and sisters is only looking for the things that we can obtain from them, even when we have a revolution, the problem is going to be is that once we obtain it, then we're going to continue to take from others instead of give all that we have for one another. Because this thing is deep and it's serious, and if we don't take it that way, we'll have a problem. So you have to install spirituality, and that is ingrained in a culture, because the culture has precepts that are abstract, but the culture teaches you how to apply them to fix self first, to work as a community, and then from there, now you can move forward or progress and advance.
Okay, so I guess a simpler question to sum all up: can we have spirituality without morality?
No, you can't. Spirituality dictates morality. What is spirituality? The essence that make us who we are. We were placed here on this planet so we can govern this planet. Us, right? Indigenous people. So if we're not mindful that we are the inherent rulers or the inherent owners of this planet, then the problem is going to be is that our morality is going to fall out of sync. The objective is to maintain harmony. Harmony is the most important thing. When we study the body physiologically tries to maintain homeostasis. How does it make sure that each organ is working together, talking with one another, and maintaining your health and your well-being? So in looking at that aspect or that paradigm of self inside, we would have to look externally and say, okay, in our external environment, how can we reflect that? So morality is your obligation to the fellow brother and sister that is there around you, and spirituality is what brings that to the surface and actually actualizes it and makes it happen. So an example of spirituality is if I say I'm going to be kind today, how many brothers and sisters that look like me am I going to and say, hey, how you doing, brothers and sisters? Is everything good with you? Is there something that you would like to speak to? What's on your mind today? What are the things that are plaguing you? How can I help you? Right? Being kind is something that's abstract, but once we apply it to see the importance and the value and benefit in doing so that's immediate, we'll continue to do so as well. So without spirituality, you cannot drive yourself to morality or a code of ethics that you have to operate around, because the objective is to oblige everybody who's agreeing to that culture, if we're going to enact a revolution, that we are all on the same page, at least at the basic fundamentals as a code of ethics.
Why is discipline an important pillar of revolution?
The reason why discipline is because it removes your selfish ambitions. Whenever a selfish ambition is the thing that is driving a revolution, you will never have success. You know why? Because there will be compromise. When you understand through discipline, and there's various means you can learn discipline. I know some brothers in our community are veterans. They went to the Army, they've learned that from the Army. The only problem is they've learned it to be so towards the oppressor. But if we can take those skills and apply it to self, then we understand that the objective is the collective whole, not self. You're not fighting for self, you're fighting for the collective whole. When we look at martial arts also teaches you discipline, because the number one key when fighting an enemy is, number one, never allow the enemy to upset you. Your move should not be dictated based on anger. See, we are too reactionary and we're not proactivists. Let me say it again. We're too reactionary and we're not proactivists. So what happens is when you have discipline, discipline forces you to be a proactivist. Pro means motioning towards, activism means making something happen. Reactionary is somebody stepped on my foot, I'm going to get mad and I'm going to wild out. Oh, I see a brother get shot in the street by the cops, so I'm going to get angry. That's reactionary. You cannot have a plan based on reactions. Discipline teaches you to restrain that lower self and to only act as preventive measures to withhold that particular circumstance from happening again in the future. So this is why discipline is very important. And if we look 40, 50, 60 years ago, this is why we had marginal success with the Black Panthers, because it was all about discipline. And you know why? A lot of those brothers and sisters was coming back from the war and they found that they had to fight another battle at home. And you know what they said? They said, you know what? We're looking at our communities in disarray. We're fighting for this government and not getting no support. The number one thing we have to teach these young black men is that you have to do for self. Because if you don't do for self, nobody will do with you. And once you take care of your home, the next extended home is your community.
Indeed. So after establishing those principles as being key prerequisites to a complete revolution, what would you say would be some factors or parts of past revolutions that we can take now to mold into an amalgam of a new black revolution here in America?
Excellent. So we have to look at history to understand where we're going in the future. One of the most important things is on my YouTube channel, I actually have a video where it says suggestions onto ensuring the survival of autonomous black communities. What are some things that our ancestors overlooked or glossed over that caused their situation to be undermined and taken hold of? The most important thing we have to look at is that when we go back to the Civil War, we see after the period of Civil War was Reconstruction. During the period of Reconstruction, the objective was, on the surface, the federal government was going to the southern states to ensure that equality was being extended to the ex-slaves, so that way they can vote and have other things such as integration into schools and things of that nature. The number one thing that we thought of, that we were forced to do, was become autonomous. Why? Because most of the ex-slaves in the South had all the trades. So if you have all the trades, you can start your own businesses, you can start your own communities. But what happened was the objective was to disenfranchise or cause a perpetual disenfranchise of those African Americans, so that way they cannot create their own autonomous homes. So what happened? Well, the first thing that happened was we didn't have a way to finance ourselves. our currency was still predicated upon our oppressor. Anytime you have to lean on your oppressor to finance your revolution, you will never be successful. So that was one of the main issues that we had. The second thing is we did not control the law, right? We didn't have anybody in a place of power to pass laws that were favorable to our community. The third thing was we had the slave masters that had their plantations that were empty. So the ex-slave chasers or ex-slave catchers, they were hired by the state and the local governments to be police officers because a new policy was enacted that they wanted them to enforce so they can continue to perpetually disenfranchise us and get us back on that plantation. Also, we didn't have our own land. So we had to do sharecropping, which means we had to go back on the plantation and we had to lease from our slave master, and whatever we yield from the ground, we had to give over to the oppressor. So a lot of these things affected us, but the most important thing is once we understood, after we got past the black codes, after we got past the pig laws, after we got past the Vagrancy Act, all these things designed to arrest us, put us back into the convict leasing program, and place us back on the plantations, we decided, you know what, we're not even going to be next to our oppressor and we're going to move away. So what we did was we started our own communities with our own trades. The problem was the states decided to say, hey, let's find a way to regulate these things and create these labor laws, right? Or these unions, so we can regulate to make sure that everybody's being treated equally and fairly, right? So in doing so, this was a way to undermine our autonomy, and it hurt and it adversely affected us. Fast forwarding from there, we move up towards what we call Black Wall Street, and a lot of us know about Black Wall Street. This is a cliche now. There's actually a documentary, a documentary movie that was released recently, and I placed it on my Facebook page. Y'all can check it out, in regards to what happened in regards to Black Wall Street. Well, here's some pointers that we have to keep in mind, so that way if another one is revitalized or we resurrect another one, how to protect and secure it. The most important thing that we did not have was international trade agreements. We had a community that was self-sufficient and autonomous with all the trades, our own intellectual properties, etc. But we had no solidarity with any African nation governments. That caused a big problem. Why do I say this? Is because if you are being prosperous as a black individual here in America, you should never allow that genius to be local. That genius needs to be international. You know why? Because the United States is a giant. They will continue to oppress you. They will continue to put you in a chokehold and everything that they can do to suppress your success. But if you have an international trade agreement with other nation governments, more particularly in the continent of Africa, then what will happen is if something happens to you, they will be interested to know what's going on with your well-being. Do you know why? Because they're doing business with you. You're bringing wealth and you're helping to ensure that their economy is thriving. So the number one thing that they lacked to do was international trade agreements. Second thing was intel. Intel is very important. You cannot be autonomous in a bubble and not know what's going on outside of you. You know why? Because when something's about to go down, you will have no idea. You'll be blitzkrieg, blindsided, and then you'll be blitzed and the game will be over. So we need to ensure that even if we do have an autonomous community, if we're going to do some form of revolution which starts first with culture, community, and autonomy, we need to still have other people that is aggregated in society that can relay intel back over to those autonomous communities so we are aware of things before they take place. The third thing is we need to have our own manufacturing factories. We have to have assembly lines. We have to be able to produce things on a moment's notice really quick in a way so we can make it portable in the event that we have to be on the move. They did not have this. Everything that they had was centered just in their own community, and they still had to go outside for other manufacturing needs. That causes a problem because if you're trying to wage a battle, you're going to be limited to the resources that you have, and you can't go to your press and say, hey, can I have some more resources to fight back against you? It's not going to work. So our objective is never to be the offensive, but be on the defensive, is to protect ourselves. That way we can stay under the radar, and that way we won't seem to be a threat, and all we're doing is defending our inherent so-called God-given rights to defend our family, our community, and our well-being. A fourth thing that we have to look at is technology. Technology is important. Were these communities self-sustainable, right? Earth ships is an option. And I mentioned this in a lecture before. Earthshift is a self-sustainable home. You don't need electric companies. You don't need water companies. You don't need any of these things to sustain yourself. It can cool itself. It can heat itself. You can do your own water from the rainwater. You can feed your own self from your garden that you can plant, from the fisheries that you can have. And this home itself is not built under any kind of ground wires, because the reason why the federal government can charge you regulatory fees and impose it upon you when you get your utility bills is because there's wires and pipes that's running under your home. And if you're able to set up this Earthship without those wires and pipes, or once you purchase the land and tell the outside utilities, it's okay, you don't have to run nothing through my property because we don't need your services, that's another degree of autonomy, because the home is self-sustainable. It can't turn the power off on you, it can't turn the water off on you, and you will continue to sustain yourself indefinitely off the land. So this is something else that we have to create, is technology to give us free energy. You know what free energy is? It's a system that pulls electrons from out of the atmosphere to generate a generator that continue to pump and give you electricity. It is a secondary means to power aside from solar power. We have to invest in that. You know what's something else? Force fields. People are like, wow, force fields, that sounds like some sci-fi stuff. No, the military has force field technology. If we have force field technology where we had everything sustainable in our own communities, guess what? Once we trigger that force field, nothing can get in. And if nothing can get in, then there's nothing that they can do with us, right? But we have to have intel to understand how we're going to launch this, what things are going to happen, and our satellite system is important. We have to have some means of getting information or communication to various points, because if it's only localized, they're going to cut us off. So these are just some of the many suggestions that I've given previously, that if we employ these things, these are additional options that we can have in order to maintain our sustainability.